Hello and welcome. Today we are talking all about the world. Is it a simulation? My name is Jody Lynn Craven, founder of Abundance Consciousness, and this is my dear friend Heather Marie, founder of Soulgate.
Hi, welcome to Channel Squared, where we connect with you, the divine, and channel here with you live.
Yeah. Okay. So we've been hearing a lot of this lately. You know, the world is just simply a simulation, like the first person shooter movies, or not movies, video games, and that you can change the simulation around you. So we decided we're going to channel about it and find out what the real scoop is. Is our world a simulation? Is it like a hologram? What does that mean? And I guess, what are the rules? Like, how do we change it?
Well, all of that is a very loaded question. So let's break it down bit by bit.
Yes.
Is the world a simulation? I get a yes. It is.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, when we were preparing for this episode, we were talking a little bit about, what does that mean in, is the world a simulation? And you channeled some really interesting information about, that it is, and about the DNA. And what I took away from it is that the DNA contains the programming, if you will, of the simulation that is to unravel. Did I get that right?
Yes. Yeah. And all of the coding information, like if you were to make this a computer, the capacity to do anything with this computer, all of that is available to you. I'm just confirming with my channel. Yes. You just have to know how to code it properly to see the reality, create the reality, to code the reality that you desire.
So when we were talking about this, I was like, well, where in the DNA is this? How, is it in all of the DNA? And so what I got was that it becomes cellular. So the DNA, as you know, is in every single cell of the body and in every cell of everything that's in the experience, right? So you've got all the DNA and all of the various things, but we're going to talk about the human body for sake of simplicity. Simplicity. So what they're saying is that, when you look at the DNA and how all of that information is brought in on a cellular level, there's a particular place in the DNA where this data is actually stored. And so they show me that, that double helix that, we know as the image of DNA, right? You've got the double helix and you've got the joiners, is what I'm going to call them. And so they're showing that in this DNA, there's a particular place that has esoteric information. So I'm going to call this our spiritual DNA. So I think it's really interesting that we take a human form that has human DNA, and that there is also, as part of this programming or simulation information in it, that there's also a part of the DNA that keeps us connected to where we came from on a soul level.
Mm-hmm.
Did I get that right? Okay, yeah, just checking. Okay, so the part, this information is stored in an area of the DNA that science doesn't really look at. And I think that that's really fantastic and terrible all at the same time. And so when we were talking about this, it was kind of like this contradiction that this internal struggle that I'm having about this, because it's boy, if science got a hold of that DNA, boy, they could really do amazing things and terrible things. I mean, we've seen kind of how science has been, in the last few years. And now kind of looking at it gosh, if that got into the wrong hands, that could be dangerous.
Yeah.
But in the right hands, that could be really powerful. So interesting the contrast there with the DNA.
Absolutely. Whew. Already like dropping bombs. I think we all inherently knew this, that it was in our DNA in every cellular structure. I mean, when you just think about it on a high surface level, you know, if you believe, which I do, that we're all fractals of God, then the fractal of God must appear in every cell of everything.
Exactly.
And that I would assume is what you're talking about when you talk about esoteric knowledge or that connection there.
Right.
Okay, so what does this mean? It's a simulation. It's like a video game, which, you know, we're playing different levels as we move around. That's when the picture becomes clearer. You know, that feels so unrealistic as you drive your car to the same store that you go to get groceries every single week. Like, my mind is going 100 miles a minute here. Like, is it like, does the tree really fall in the forest if nobody sees it? Like, does it make a sound? Like, is that actually happening? Is that like, where is the collective consciousness in this? And where does the simulation stop? I don't even know if any of that made sense, but those are things running through my mind.
Yeah. And so I want to like kind of add on to that because, you know, as I'm like processing this with my own mind, I'm thinking, you know, okay, if that's all simulation and the collective consciousness, it thinks a certain way. Does it think this way because like, does the collective consciousness process in this way because of the collective or because of the collective programming? Like, and did it come from the program? Well, I mean, and is it programming that we came in with, or is it programming that we experience, like experiential programming?
And when you say collective programming that we come in with, is it on that esoteric level, like divine knowledge, if you will, or past lifetimes of societal stuff that we're bringing into the next lifetime, like conditioned beliefs? Perhaps.
Right. I mean, what a question, right? I mean, if you think about like, we'll go back to some ancestral stuff, right? So I am Native American Indian, and the tribe that I, you know, am a descendant of, they had, I mean, all the tribes had a really rough go. Like, let's just be real, okay? But this particular tribe was very peaceful tribe, and we're not really much into the fighting. And so they were easily wiped out because, you know, they were peacekeepers. And when you think about how that must have been for them, trying to be peacekeepers, being attacked, and watching their, you know, fellow tribal members die, a certain amount of that gets coded into that cellular DNA that gets passed forward to generation. And what's really fascinating is when I look at that, I came from this peaceful group, I have this innate feeling inside that's like, let's just work it out. Let's just talk it through. There's a peaceful solution to this, but if you mess with my family, you're going down. Right. And so it's funny because like it's just this thing in me that it's like, you don't mess with my family, right? Like my family is like the gold in my bucket. You're not going to mess with that. And so I have this very strong like commitment and like, I don't know, it's like a primal instinct to protect my family at all costs.
Yeah.
But maybe we can do it peacefully, you know? And so it's interesting, like when we're talking about this, you know, coming into the hologram, you know, this whole video game simulation. But then there's this other piece that it's like, oh no, I came from, you know, I'm a descendant of this type of environment also. So is that part of the hologram too? Like, is that part of the plan too?
I think so. I don't know. Let's ask. Where do we start with this question?
I don't even know.
Yeah, I don't even know.
We bit off a lot today.
Yeah, I feel like we could talk about this for several weeks and still have more questions. But why don't we tune in and ask them?
Okay, let's ask them first about the ancestral data that comes in on our cells. Let's ask first about that. Okay. Is that part of the simulation? Can I go first?
Yeah, you go first.
Okay. So what I'm getting is that they're telling me that I'm being very human right now, and that I'm looking at time as a timeline that's linear, and they're bringing me back to time being all at once. So they're saying that, yes, this is part of the simulation, as we're calling it, because it's all happening right now. There's other iterations of me living in those timelines that are bringing about the same information. So the instance that we are occurring in right now in this moment is occurring in another timeline. If we're looking at it linearly, another moment, but that moment is actually right now too. Isn't that funny how we always get brought back to timeline?
Yeah.
I mean, how many episodes have we done where they have said exactly that the time is all right now?
Yeah, the time is all right now. So many.
Right.
And that's really difficult to digest. So let me try. What I am hearing is, because it's all happening right now, there's another iteration of you that is connected. We know that everything and everyone is connected. My assumption is that the connection to our past or present or future selves is slightly different than our connection to friends or family or whatever. That would be my assumption, and we can verify with the channel that is true. But let's say it's a different cord because it is another iteration of your soul, or your soul, a piece directly of your soul. So you will feel it differently. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So that's why you feel those things more prevalently than somebody who had a past life of, or any other past life, because it wasn't you, your divine soul going through it in this moment. Okay. I feel like I'm like, brain coming out of my head. Okay. So when I asked the question of, I don't even remember what our original question was, but my guides were being more elusive on, well, what is reality? And alluding to that all reality is the simulation. All of it, past, present, future,
all of it.
Now. All of it is the simulation. Okay.
That is so insane. Sometimes, it just still surprises me, some of the information that we, get, that it, like, as a human living in this experience, sometimes it's even takes me a minute to like digest that information.
Yeah.
So if everything, all of reality is a simulation, and we look at the simulation as, we're going to just call it a video game, because I think that that's something that's relatable. People understand video games, you know, it's a programming that you play, and depending on how you play your game, you interact with various characters in the game, you know. And so as you are having this experience, there's a certain amount of the experience that is pre-programmed.
Yes.
Right. And so even if you play the game a certain way, the game eventually is going to lead you back to a certain aspect of the game that you need to actually play to advance to the next level. Right.
Sure.
You have to play the boss in order to get to the next level. Right. So even if you play all the little fields in the game, eventually you have to go up against the boss to move to the next level. So I would relate that to being the, you know, boss level being the markers that you came in saying you wanted to experience.
Yep.
And even if you try to circumvent the boss, you're still going to get brought back to that, because these are things that you said you wanted when you were coming.
Yeah, you're going to conquer the castle, or you're going to have to go to the castle battle, if you will.
Exactly.
Like you're always going to end up there.
Exactly. So how much of the simulation do we actually get to control?
Yeah. My question was very similar. What are things that are constant or absolute, meaning that throughout every simulation, they are exactly the same? And part 2 of that question is, how much of that is derived by the collective consciousness? Like the first car looked like the first car, and we see cars the same way because of the first car. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah. So there's 2 parts in that question.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm getting about, they're talking about how the collective consciousness sees things, and that everything that is seen is a variation, one and the same, of the same thought. So we all are agreeing, I'm looking for something to hold up, that this is a pen, and that writing utensils all look like this. But this could also be a pen.
Okay.
If we all agreed. Okay. But we wouldn't. We all agree that this is an elephant, not a pen. So they're saying that it's very astute of you to think in that way, that the first person sees a car and therefore it becomes the car. And because of the connection, the collective consciousness, we all agree that that is a car. And every car after it has wheels, sides, doors, windows, air conditioning, you know, like this is an agreement that we all make because we're all funneling into the same consciousness.
Yeah.
What was the first question?
Are there any constant,
the rules?
Or yeah. Are there any absolutes, like things that cannot change, that are constant throughout the simulation?
Interesting. So the first thing that I heard was nature.
Oh,
which I think is really fascinating, considering our conversation last week about plants.
Life of plants.
So what they're saying is that nature, while it evolves to accommodate the environment, it is still it is still always regenerating, and it still always is what they're saying. So even though we may change it, we may cut down forests, we may pollute oceans, we may do these things, that because nature has this like cyclical structure, it will like renew and regenerate and will support ecosystems, because it always will be. So
It's
it may,
constant.
it's the constant.
Huh. That's really fascinating when you start to think back into history, which is really now. But you know, the great floods, the ice age, it felt like a reset of sorts. And perhaps that is exactly what it was nature saying, all right, time for a reset. And it's the only one perhaps that can in the physical world. That is what creates the reset. I truly believe that our history is much longer. Like there has been ancient civilizations that have been covered up and that have gotten to, you know, to and beyond where our civilized society is today. But then we're completely wiped out. And it was always because of nature. Like you think of Atlantis or the stories of Atlantis, it was the collapse into the ocean or the giant wave that came up, or that's what I've heard anyway. It's always nature that is the constant and the reset.
Right. That leads me down the rabbit hole of this global warming theme, right? Is that real? Is that real?
I think, this is just my personal opinion, that it's very publicized and very politicized for gains that have nothing to do with the environment. And while that is true, and I think some of the ways that we are going towards, or that they're trying to be put onto our world today, are ridiculous and they don't make a whole lot of sense. It's not about the environment. I can clearly see that. I also clearly see the need for appreciation, like we talked about last week in our Secret Life of Plants, in that, you know, they gave us life. Without nature, we would not be able to survive as the human race. Like we need nature to survive. And I think we don't appreciate nature in that way. So I think for me, the environmental movement, it's meant to appreciate nature and the diversity that it gives us, and have more respect and more of this fluid relationship of exchange with it, like we would another person, versus the way that we operate today in our society, which is basically cut it all down, remove it, and live without it in a big concrete jungle.
Well, and, you know, if you look back to, you know, some of the indigenous people and their relationship to nature, they worked in harmony with nature. You know, the seasons were a way for them to, you know, they knew like they needed to plant, they needed to migrate, they needed to live in a way that actually correlates to what nature requires also. Mm-hmm. And so when you look at, you know, these indigenous cultures, they always lived within what the earth was providing for them. And we've gotten really far away from that.
Yeah.
So one of the things, go ahead.
I was just going to say, even the settlers, like outside of the native culture, people who settled on new lands did exactly the same. Like my great grandparents were settlers to Canada, on both sides, I believe. So they had to break land, and they built the first churches, and they built the first schools, and they, had the doctors with the doctors' buggies, and they had to get water from the river, and they had to learn how to plant and cultivate the soil so that it would grow the things that they needed. And they had to learn how to take care of animals and cultivate that relationship with all living things around them, or they would have died.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, what were you going to say?
So I was going to say that, I wanted to speak to the consciousness of that and the agreements that were made. So something that they're bringing up is that when this relationship between the various species that occupy the earth as we know it, there were like agreements that were made to support and respect one another. And so when all of the, and this is kind of getting a little biblical here, right? Like if we use the idea of, the 7 days, right? And the creation of the earth and man and all of the creatures. So what they're saying is that when all of these different
animals,
I'm going to say pieces. Species were built, when this experiment was built, that it was built and there were like agreements made between the various species of how they were going to support and respect one another. And so when there is a big reset, it happens because there's an imbalance in the agreement.
Yeah. You know what? I've always thought of that in the conversation of the environment and the cows' farts damaging the environment. I've never really truly believed that. I think that the studies are they have a lot of holes, and from my perspective, I can see how they've shifted the narrative to be said narrative of this is bad. It's bad to do this. It's bad for the environment. It's bad for the cows and whatever. And the one question that I always had is being a farmer, growing up as a farmer, we were land farmers, but we have horses and stuff like that. When I was little, we had pigs, and when my sisters were still around, they had a few cows, like a dairy cow and whatever. I don't remember that because I was too young. I remember the pigs, but I remember I've always thought to myself, like, what will the cows do? Like I don't agree with mass manufacturing like we're doing today. I think it's harmful for the planet. I think it's harmful for ourselves. And I think it's very detrimental, like thinking about slaughterhouses and how the animals actually dealt with. And I would prefer to get my meat from somebody that I know took care of the cow personally. And I have been learning a lot about halal and how they work with the animal, respect the animal, and it's a sacred thing. Now in thinking all of this over, I've always thought, what about the cows? So if all the people stop eating meat, like you're not allowed to eat cows anymore, just cows as the example. You're not allowed to eat cows anymore. What are they going to do? Like if a farmer has the land that the cow is eating off of, well, if the farmer can't make money off of the cow anymore, there's no point in having it, and it's illegal to consume it, they're not going to let the cow stay there. Like for what? They're not going to take care of the cow anymore. And then what's going to happen to the cow? We're going to have cows in the wild. Well, the cows they're not really smart enough and sufficient enough to take care of themselves. Like they would just die. The coyotes would eat them. Like when you talk to a cattle farmer, they have dogs or they have donkeys or they have llamas, and they're very protective of the young because they can't take, like out in the actual wild, they would all die. So I think you're bang on the money what the channel is saying about these agreements And I can see now how when there is a reset, it's because of this imbalance in the power dynamic. I can see exactly that happening now.
Totally. And I think that that's really, I think that's really a great example of the agreements, right? The cows would die in the wild.
Yeah.
So the farmers agreed to care for them. And in exchange for caring for them and them getting to have life and experience life and live on a beautiful pasture, they will nourish the farmer that saved them, basically, and all their friends. Now, absolutely. I think that commercial farming is a complete crap show. I think that the industrialization of farming and
food in general,
the entire food industry is just, and this is my personal opinion, and I will say it loud and proud, I think it's just fucked, really. Yeah. Excuse me. But I think that, I get that we have to feed the people, but there are better ways. And 100%. The technology is there to be able to provide food for the people in better ways that are better for the environment, better for the animals, better for the plants, better for everything. Absolutely. So, I just think it's just crap.
Well, and I think it comes back to that respect and that relationship, that acknowledgement and that appreciation. You don't have the same appreciation buying a steak from the grocery store as I think that you do watching that cow grow up and feeding it and nurturing it and taking care of it and knowing, or at least knowing where it came from and shaking the hands of the people who prepared it for you.
Exactly. Yeah. It's interesting. When we lived in California, we went to a farm called Primal Pasture, and they have a product called Pasture Bird, which we still get our chicken from them. Like, we ship it from California, which wow. I know, the shipping, everything, but they're working hard to get to a smaller carbon footprint. But the point is that they are all about regenerative farming. And, they move different animals to different fields at different times to regenerate the soil. And you can see photographs of how it looked before they started and how it looked several years later of regenerative farming on the land. And it's incredible how they use no irrigation. And it's incredible how much they've regenerated the land. And so, these, again, going to the agreements, these people are doing good things for the earth while still feeding the people. And so where are we as humanity, as society, in our agreements? Where are we dropping the ball? Like, let's take a look at it, because when the agreements aren't met is a reset.
That makes me a little nervous because I see how messed up things are. We're driven by money, like almost wholly, like WHOL. I don't know how to spell that word. Whole as a whole, that word. As a whole, we're in society, we're driven by money and profit and that luxury and all of that. We've gotten really far away from the environment, nurturing it, even just having, in terms of that, what they would call a simpler life.
Yes.
So that makes me nervous thinking about a reset, because I feel like perhaps that's impending doom that maybe we can't get away from, because that's the one constant. There, I said it out loud.
Okay, but let's look at that for a second. If there's a reset, okay, yeah. And we're having, and we are looking at the way that we have manipulated and moved from this simpler life, from having respect and honoring the agreements of the land that we live on, right? Mm-hmm. Because we're focused on money. We're focused on luxury. We're focused on being super productive and making all kinds of material gains.
Yeah.
So, what kind of reset could there be? What is the one reset that could change everything and bring things back into agreements?
Perhaps a financial reset?
Perhaps.
I was
Perhaps.
thinking more like the next ice age. Yes, but I agree with where you're going with that. I think that absolutely there is a financial reset that we're upon. And I think the point or purpose of said reset is to bring people back, this society back to the reality, the true reality, which is nature and being one with one another. And that includes all of the agreements, not just human, but all of the agreements that were made when we came here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, this conversation
that got heavy quick.
Yeah. This conversation took a total turn. I thought we were going to talk about, if this, like, there's still questions that I have. Do we have another 10 minutes, Heather? Can we make another 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it. Because the questions that I have is, I feel like this reality is kind of like a virtual reality. You put the goggles on and you can move around, you can touch things, and you can say, I'm now in Hawaii. Is that possible within this simulation to change the current reality that you're seeing physically in front of you like that?
Yes.
Okay. How?
I knew that was going to be the next question. They're reminding us that everything that is already exists, right? Nothing's new. Nothing's being actually invented. It's just about bringing it into your experience. And, this is something that, my husband works a lot in creation, and it's different from manifestation. So what they're speaking to right now is what we kind of know as manifestation. So the fact that it already exists, the reality that you want to experience already exists, because you're cognizant to the fact that it already exists. You're just not playing in that part of the game, right? So this creation that already exists, you're wanting to pull this kind of into your reality. And so this is what we all sort of refer to as manifestation, right? You're bringing forward something into your experience that's already in existence. They're talking about, this alignment, seeing it, the feeling it, all of the things that we already know about how do you manifest your world. Everyone's like, oh, you got to think it, and then you got to feel it, and then it's going to show up in your reality, right? You have to see it, and you have to think it, and you have to feel it, and that's how it comes.
Yeah.
But, it's more about, are you in alignment to receive it? So if you are wanting to play a different variation of the game, you have to be in vibrational alignment with that part of the game.
You got to walk through the right door.
Right.
And the door will only appear if you have eyes to see. This is really interesting. We've been channeling a lot this week, and I keep hearing this phrase, the eyes to see, as if it's a biblical phrase. And it could be, but you have to allow your eyes to see.
Well, and the thing is that if you are only looking at it from one perspective, perhaps you're never going to see it. Exactly. You might be going, oh, I really want to just be in Hawaii right now. You're like, oh man, but I don't have any money, and I got to buy an airline ticket, and the hotels are so expensive, and how am I going to afford to go? I don't have the money to go. Okay. What if you said, I'm going to go to Hawaii in April? Universe, bring it to me. And as you are, making this request, you're feeling yourself being there, and you are uplifting your vibration to how you actually are going to experience this wonderful trip.
Mm-hmm.
And you align yourself with this. What if this trip shows up as a timeshare thing? What if it shows up as a gift?
A winnings.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Someone wants you to come. Someone wants you to come work with them that lives there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for example, I just, my ex's daughter had a baby. I call her my daughter, and I refer to this new baby as my grandbaby. So I am determined to get to California to meet this new grandbaby. And I thought, gosh, I'm going to have to fly over there or drive. And, how am I going to get this done? And I'm like, you know what? It's just going to happen. It's just going to show up for me. I need to go. I started thinking about how fun it was going to be to spend some time with her, and how much fun it was going to be to hold this new baby, and, how excited I was about it. And then I just kind of put a pin in it. And I had a former student reach out to me and say, hey, if you're going to come and, you want to come and meet the baby, why don't I train with you why don't I work with you for a few days? What? That's a great idea. So there came the resources for me to make the trip happen. And then as a result of that, more resources, more people jumped in and said, I want that too. I want that too. And so it became kind of like a work trip. And I get to go have the little vacation that I want to have, and I get to see the people that I want to see.
Yeah.
And it happens just like that. And it was easy. It was effortless. I didn't have to go looking for it. It just showed up. So what they're talking about is about getting yourself into alignment so that you can see the door that you need to walk through, and then to say yes and walk through the door. Who knows where it's going to lead you?
Boom. Mic drop, Heather. Whew. Do you have anything to add to our conversation about simulation?
I don't think so. But I think we should have Quinn on again to talk about creation. Because
absolutely,
you can create what doesn't exist. And I can't think of anybody more appropriate to talk about that.
We'll have to tee him up.
Yeah.
Oh, this has been a bombshell conversation, and we're not done yet. We are going to continue next week with talking about the collective consciousness and how the new children will break the collective agreement. So if you liked this conversation, make sure you hit that like button, and that you're subscribed, and that you hit a reminder for next week as we talk all about the children and how they're breaking the collective agreement and what that means for everyone on planet Earth. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next week.